Just your reaction on the Charlie Kirk murders. We've got still some more reaction that I will read out, and it's really a lot of people, perhaps listening, will not have known who Charlie Kirk was unless they're. I mean, I'm into watching TikTok debates and Substack and all of those things. I spread my church very broadly in terms of where I get my information from. So I was aware of Charlie Kirk, and I in fact had to explain to my team who he was when I came in, It was sometimes uncomfortable to watch his debates. It was sometimes difficult. I didn't always agree with him. Sometimes, occasionally, I did agree with him. But I always believed he had the right to say what he believed. Absolutely, 100%. As a journalist, you have to believe. I think it's a central tenet of journalism. A lot of people will see this, even if they didn't know him, as an attack on that freedom.
Very much so. I mean, it's another terrible shooting in America, and not a name well known to many people, as you say, in the UK, Petrie, but huge in America in terms of his influence, particularly among Gen Zers and TikTok users, because he was a leader really of the sort of MAGA influencers and of cheerleading for Trump really, and for youth. And I think it was said that 2/3 of American young people will have seen or at least browsed some of what he'd been saying on TikTok. So massively influential, particularly among the sort of younger people. But really, yes, yet another attack after the attempted assassination attempt on the president last year on free speech. And it wasn't the sort of speech, for those that weren't familiar with it, that was hate speech. It might have been stuff you didn't agree with, and very much in the Trump. It wasn't hate speech, but it wasn't the sort of along the lines of kill people or do this, that, and the other. It was just the sort of MAGA cheerleading, if you like, with particular strain of politics. Might not be everybody's strain of politics, but very popular in America, and particularly popular with the TikTok generation. So absolutely awful. I'd like to say, will have massive ramifications in America, but we all know what will change things in America, which is banning guns. They're not going to do that. They don't do it every time there's a school shooting, and I doubt anything will change this time. And that's the real tragedy of America, is that they see that it's wrong, they all condemn it, but at the end of the day, pretty much anybody can get hold of a gun and do what they like with a gun, as has tragically happened on this occasion. Terrible.
And this will presumably send shivers down the spines of anybody who's a public speaker in America. I mean, look, we're used to some political violence in this country, but the idea that you can't go to a rally, or you can't go to something without the fear that somebody who just disagrees with you, we don't know the motives yet, but it's likely to be some form of distance between what Charlie Kirk was saying and thinking and believed in, and the person who shot him. That must be quite scary in America. Very scary, and I mean, I think you're potentially going to see a situation where you have, with the Pope and the sort of famous Pope-mobile, where speakers will only be able to speak behind bulletproof glass, and that disconnects them from their audience. Many won't want to do that, but as long as people have powerful telescopic rifles and guns like that, it's pretty easy, as we saw with the attempted assassination on Trump, to shoot people from distance, and that's really alarming. But it's worth pointing out, I think Trump recently withdrew the security from Kamala Harris just ahead of her going on a book tour. So if you're going to up protection on political figures, and it certainly looks like America needs that, you need to do that across the board, because many people, these assassination attempts, they're not, sometimes it's politically motivated, but sometimes because they want to target a famous figure because they want to be famous. We don't know the motives, as you say, yet in this case, but it's got really chilling potential impact on free speech and just the safety of politicians right across America. Yeah, I mean, just the idea of trying to silence a particular view, if indeed that was the motive here, it is going to silence some people. It is going to scare some people. I mean, goodness knows I get enough comments. It's never silenced me, but because I believe in free speech, and free speech goes both ways. I object strongly when they ban speakers coming to this country who are objectionable on every level and hateful on every level, but I believe in free speech, and I believe they should be speaking, and we should, hear what they have to say, and we can disagree if we want to. A lot of people are saying that this is an attack specifically on freedom of speech. Do you believe that it will have that effect? Yes, I think because that culture started, we've seen it, and I always tend to go back to social media. There's been an attempt, hasn't it, to shut people down on social media, and what we're seeing a little bit of, certainly it looks like in this case, and also we've seen in the UK, is that then seeps out to other elements of society where people start on social media trying to shut people down and abuse them and threaten them, and of course that bleeds across in a very limited number of cases, albeit, but into wider society, and in the most horrendous of examples ends up with people trying to attack people. And this is probably what's happened in this case.
Yeah, it sort of, in a way, reminds me of the Jill Dando case, many, many years ago now. But the theories around that, they've never found the person who did it to her. But again, that was an attack on her journalism or on her freedom of speech. So this is not a new phenomenon.
Not at all. I mean, I remember that case very well, not least because I worked in Bristol at the time, so I knew her friends
Bristol,
and family, absolutely. Yeah. She was murdered by an unknown hitman on the doorstep of her Fulham home, and it was widely believed it was because she was the sort of front person, if you like, for Crime Watch. Among the rumours, it could have been a Serbian hit squad or people that she'd highlighted on the show. We never know who did it, but almost certainly it was linked to something to do with her campaigning journalism and shutting her voice because she was highlighting crime.
Yeah, and it's so difficult. It's so awful that we've come to this place as a species where. Well, I was just talking to Bill Keeler before you came in, and he does a phone-in New York, and he said it is getting more difficult to have just a debate with somebody to say, well, I don't agree with that, but I respect your right to say that, you know. And as the host, he gets attacked for telling both sides of the story, because even that isn't acceptable. If you try to tell both sides of the story, somehow you've become partisan, which is the opposite to what it is you're actually doing. I don't know what people are hearing.
I think it's also the way views have become polarised. So if I have a different view from you or anybody else, I might think, well, we've just got different views. I think now people take the view, well, I'm right and Petrie's wrong. And that's been brought about by some of the stridency of the debate again online and various forums, is that people no longer seem to be able to accept the fact that somebody has a different view and they could be right. It's just, no, this person's wrong. They're absolutely wrong. I am right because I've listened to this, or I've read this on Facebook, or President Trump says this, or President Obama said that, and I believe them, therefore the other person's wrong. And of course that's not the case. The other person usually just has a different view. Unless you're going to say something ridiculous, potentially like the Earth's flat, then usually the other person has probably just got a different, well-meaning, well-held view. It's not that they're right or wrong, or you're right or wrong.
Yeah, and there used to be some topics, Vincent, that there was pointless ever doing as a phone-in. I've been doing phone-ins for 30 years. And I would steer clear of them because people were so entrenched in those 2 or 3 subjects, and it was just bad radio. It just wasn't interesting, right? Because somebody was either literally so far on one side and literally so far on the other side that it wasn't good listening. So I didn't do those very often. That list is getting longer and longer and longer, to the point where I've had to say to myself, you just have to do them anyway. Because people are so entrenched.
Yeah, and people won't change their minds. I mean, you can look at anything happening in the news at the moment. I mean, take healthcare issues. There are people who have a very entrenched view, for example, that vaccines are bad for you, including some very prominent politicians. Now, that's clearly, I would have thought, anybody who's read about these things, not the case. But it's very hard to persuade somebody who believes that vaccines are dangerous or linked to cancer or something like that they're not, and you can present them with as much scientific evidence as you like, and you won't change their mind. And it's just strange, I think, over the last 10 or 20 years how people have been reluctant, or to the point of stubborn, to the point of absolute refusal, of being unprepared to change their views when presented with evidence, or worse still, relying on evidence from completely dodgy sources. So when you ask somebody about a medical issue and you ask them how they find out, they say, well, I read it on social media, and they'd rather rely on that than actually maybe talking to a medical professional.
Yeah, it's interesting because I do think that these entrenched views that we're seeing now align perfectly with the internet. That people go down a rabbit hole. The internet is not actually that intelligent, right? It will answer the question that you ask it. So depending on what you ask it, it depends on what the answers that you get, right? There's no opinion there. There's no, well, look, you might find this interesting. Like if you read a newspaper, for example, they will often say, well, you know, we've got you know, in our letters page there's something about this, or we've got an opinion piece as well, or we've got, you know, there will be different views. But with the internet, if you believe one thing, then you can only read that down that rabbit hole, and it doesn't offer you at any point, because it hasn't been asked, 'cause it's not clever enough, the alternative point of view. And I think that aligns perfectly with people becoming so entrenched in their own views because they've researched it, but research isn't asking a question in that sort of polarised way.
No, that's right, and not least because the algorithm will reinforce your prejudices.
Yeah.
So if you've been searching for a particular topic with a particular slant on that topic, the algorithm will show you more of that stuff.
Yeah.
So if you're wrong, it'll just carry on proving that you're right in being wrong, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
So it'll just take you further down the rabbit hole and further in the wrong direction. My one hope potentially is that you now have an AI issue. Now, if AI is to be trusted, and we don't think it is necessarily at the moment, but there's a potential where you could ask AI a question and it might give you a slightly straighter answer, or both points of view, in a way that currently you're not getting when you just search things via the well-known search engines.
And also fake news.
Very much so.
Yes,
can't. Exactly. We've got bad actors, Russia and China, who are deliberately targeting people in this country with fake news in other countries to destabilise our economies. And that's a deliberate plan, and people are swallowing some of that, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's really difficult, because you can't blame people either for falling down a rabbit hole. I genuinely think that, you know, as journalists or scientists, or you learn to ask different questions of a situation to test the answers that you're getting. But the general public, they're not taught that at school. They're not taught that sort of critical, look, if that's true, then this could also be true at the same time. Both things can be true at once. But the critical thinking just seems to be being erased, in being replaced with, you know, just go straight down your rabbit hole.
Yeah, unfortunately. I know some schools are trying to reintroduce that, or get children to think more about critical thinking, but unfortunately they're fighting this tide of misinformation from these nefarious characters like Andrew Tate and others, and it's very hard to combat that influence, really, and that's the real struggle, especially among younger people who are the most in some ways they're the most tech savvy, but they're also the most vulnerable, because they're getting channeled down particular routes, and they're not seeing the breadth of opinion, the breadth of stories, and the breadth of views on particular issues.
Well, because they're choosing their own news as well, with the topics that interest them. I mean, maybe, look, if anything, you know, if this is just open debate on debate, then you know, that is one small positive that we can take from this horrible murder.